And I think there's always that worry, if I leave it long enough, someone will tell me where I'm going, as opposed to, if I do this now, I can go and visit the retirement residences. I can go look at the senior apartments. I can decide this for myself.
Yeah.
And then I can just announce to my family I'm doing this, and usually get their support. But you do have some family members, who really make the decision for some of their aunts or uncles or parents.
Right.
And those moves are usually tougher because there's a bit of an edge to, it's not my decision, they're making me do this sort of feeling. And that's what we really want to avoid.
Right.
We want people to at least be part of this adventure that they're on, as opposed to kicking and screaming to the new place. Just makes for a nicer transition for everybody. But, every so often you'll find, or health concerns too.
Yeah.
So as people age, they're not as mobile, and perhaps they're using a cane. They may be in a number of areas in the city, of course, have 2- and 3-story homes, and basements. We're big on basements in Toronto and the GTA. So a lot of people haven't been in their basement for a long time, particularly if they have a main floor laundry room. So you find your space becomes reduced as your mobility decreases, and you're maybe not going to the second floor. You've moved the bedroom to the main floor. You may use the main floor in a basement if that's where the laundry still is and you're not about to relocate it. But we find a lot of people are confined, or by the time people are confining themselves to 1 or 2 floors, that's when, the appeal of a condo or a senior's apartment or a retirement residence is starting to look pretty good. It's on one level, I'm in.
Now, are there sort of, telltale signs that you think people should be aware of, that they see in a family member or in themselves, that mean that, it's really time for them to seriously consider downsizing? Are there any sort of telltale signs that you think are really important for people to recognize that say, okay, your family member does need to downsize now?
Well, I think and it's really interesting. I think at certain times of the year, if you're helping out or visiting parents over the next holiday seasons, you'll maybe spend a little bit. You might spend an entire day, say at Thanksgiving, and be involved in some of the preparation, or with your parents or your mom or your dad, and they may come early for the family visiting and chatting. So there's a lot of things you can be looking at, but one of them is their ability, their social abilities is one thing to look at. And we find that when people have had a spouse who's passed away and they're in a big house or even a small one, the social isolation is really, really hard for people.
Right.
They can't get out as much. They may be at that stage where they're no longer driving by choice, perhaps, or by someone else deciding. So they become more and more isolated in their homes. And that's something that you start looking at, and there's all these different, we actually do a seminar on a walk in their shoes, which is age sensitivity training. And we find that, your sense of smell goes, you have problems with eyesight, your eyesight becomes compromised. So these sort of things, you might find things in the fridge and you'll look and think, wow, there's all kinds of stuff in here that's past its best before date.
Right.
There's things in here that have mold on them. What are they thinking? This has got an expiration date, and quite often we find them of a couple of years previous. So those are the things to take a quick look at. Look at the cupboards and see, snoop around and ask and talk to your parents or loved ones about it. Say, when was the last time you made supper?
Right.
Because, we get together for family holidays, but are they eating well?
Right.
Is the mail piling up? Are there bills left unpaid? Those are the sort of things that are really good indicators of, maybe they're not coping as well as we think, but those are the signs that you see often if you spend the time over a holiday, which is a wee bit longer than a 45-minute visit, even once a week. If you're in there and you see them for 5 and 6 hours and you notice that they tire easily or they aren't hearing, the hearing thing is something. And there's a lot of things you can see in a longer visit. And we find that we get more phone calls after a holiday just because people have spent longer with their parents or aunts, uncles, whatever.
It's funny. I was wondering about that because I know that there are certain times of year where, let's say, family lawyers will say that they get more phone calls from people getting divorced. And they say it's September and January. So I was curious if there was some sort of that same sort of seasonality to your business, and that as you were talking about the holidays. So does that mean that after Thanksgiving and after Christmas, that's when people start calling you because now they've spent some extended time with their family member?
It often does. There's a bit of a spike.
Yeah.
The other thing is we will find that a lot of people will say, and I'm sure this is the same in the real estate business, but a lot of people will say, I'm not going to move until after, I want one more summer in my home.
Right.
And so we'll find a spike in, maybe September, October-ish before the winter. Or on the contrary, is I'd want one more summer. I don't want another winter. Either you're moving away from something or moving towards something else.
Exactly.
So you either really want to enjoy the good weather or you want to say, I've had enough of shoveling snow. And they're not doing it themselves, but I don't want to be going out in my neighborhood, when I'm not sure what the sidewalks are like, and it's time for me, to look at something that's more central, a retirement residence, a condo where people take really good care of the outside sidewalks and everything else, or there's a service that takes me shopping. It's all that. What services do people need?
Yeah, of course.
And when are they? And it just comes down to, or my daughter or son really can't take me out shopping. They can take me shopping once a week, but gee, I kind of would like to do whatever. So it comes back to the social part, and doing things with people who are your age. You know. So although a lot of people go to retirement residences and they will say, well, I'm not old enough for that. And yet we have some young seniors who are in there and they say it's the best decision I ever made. Right. So, it just depends on your mindset.
And I guess people have sort of a preconceived notion about what they think going to the retirement residence is going to be like. And so they're not willing to do it. But once they're there, they're probably thankful that they're there.
Well, yeah, I think because in the old days, no one wanted to be put in the home, the home, in quotes. So some of them have a very different concept of what retirement living looks like now. I mean, it's much more like being on a cruise ship than it is the home. But until you opened your mind to the possibilities of going to explore it, you're not going to know that. So we were laughing today and saying, so often in a group of friends, one person makes the jump or one couple, and they decide they're going to live in a retirement residence. And the others sort of hover around. They go over and visit. They go check it out. But they all sort of sit back and want to see how it's working before they make the leap. It's really quite funny because often you find when one moves to a retirement residence, their friends follow them.
Interesting.
It's really interesting because they now know they'll go into a place and it's like your first day at school.
Yeah.
You're much happier if you know somebody there. So moving to a retirement residence is much like, wow, at least I can have dinner with somebody I know. Or I can have coffee in the morning. So that the social part is very there. And it's so important. And we see people thrive. And families say, ever since Mom moved to the retirement residence, my gosh, it's made a heck of a difference. She's got more interest in life, more interest and enthusiasm, and she's not just sitting there moping because a day could go by, 2 days could go by without anybody dropping in.
Right, absolutely. So makes sense.
It's all, So it's really, we love what we do because somebody was saying the other day that they're working and they had come from a sales background, but they said we do sales, and she says I was in high pressure sales, selling people things they didn't need.
Right.
And she says now I'm working in a retirement residence, and she says I feel so much better going home because I'm helping people solve problems.
Right.
And giving them a solution to something that will work for them. So she says it's totally different. I'm not selling them things they don't need.
Yeah.
And we feel the same way. If we can help with the transition and take some of the weight off the family, and we say to family members, far better you come and take your mom out for dinner than stand up there saying, do you want to take this dress or this dress? Like, you don't need to do that part because that's the stressful part, really. And often we find our clients if there's an adult child involved, they'll often look at them as if to say, well, what do you think? Should I take it or not?
Right.
Whereas if the adult child isn't around, they're quite much quicker to make decisions.
Yeah.
Which is why when we say to people, we provide an estimate after we do our in-home consultation, we give them a written estimate of what we think it's going to cost to do what it is that they need. And quite often we get a phone call saying, well, that was really nice, but my son's coming in or my daughter's coming in from Vancouver or Nova Scotia. Would that affect the price? And we laugh and we say, well, it could increase it, which is not at all what they'd expect you to say. But in fact, because that's just one more person they have to vet things through to make a decision. So they want to make sure they're making the right decision as you see it often. Right. So it just takes longer. And we explain that and they laugh, but and it does, or the adult child will come in and just muddy the whole thing up. And you think, it's so much easier because we knew what we were doing. Right. But, again, respecting everybody's involvement in the process, because this is a family that has to work together after we leave. Right. So, we're very aware of everybody getting involved, but we're also quite party to seeing, families that there is one dominant person and the others maybe go along, or there's infighting and, the mom is in the middle. And, so we just help to support her in the decisions that she's making and kind of try to smooth it over with the family. It's like a realtor. You're part psychiatrist, psychologist, whatever you call it. There's a lot going on other than just selling the house. And in our case, moving someone somewhere. So
perfect. Now, can you tell me, Karen, what parts of the city do you guys tend to help people in? Well,
Gail and I started the company I started my business in 2001. Gail started in 2002. We joined as partners in 2008. And now we have, Downsizing Diva is actually a franchise company. Yeah. And we have 16 franchises across the country.
Oh, wow.
So we provide, most of them, I have to say, 14 of which are in Ontario. And one is in Victoria and one is in St. John, New Brunswick. So we think that's a Canadian company because we've gone coast to coast. There's just big hunks of it that we're not in. But primarily we do that, certainly the GTA. We go out to Burlington, up to Muskoka. Yeah. And actually, but we haven't got anyone. We provide services. When we looked at the franchise idea, Gail had an experience with a company that had franchised. And she phoned them to see if they could provide service to her. And she was told she was just on the wrong side of the border, like of a street. And she said, but I'm only 5 minutes over from that street. And they said, well, that's not our territory and we can't help you. Right. And then they asked her if she would like to buy the franchise. Oh. And she said, no, she just wanted the service. So she didn't really want to go into business. So we always said from the beginning that if someone called us and it was in an area that we're not currently working, we have a network of people across the country and into the States that we can help people anywhere with services similar. They may not be a diva, but they're certainly, we call them diva wannabes. They're somewhat insulted by that, but we know them because we've worked with them. They're our colleagues. They have training similar to ours. And we would trust them with our parents' move. So we can connect people. It might just, as I said, not be a downsizing diva yet. So we're working at, so basically anywhere in the GTA we can help.
Awesome. That sounds great. Now, I always ask people that I'm interviewing what part of the city that they live in, just to, sort of bring it back home for people to listen to what part of the city do you live in, and, do you rent or do you own?
Okay. I live in the Distillery District. Oh, cool. Actually, I live at the Canary District. I have a place at the Canary, or at Distillery, but I'm living at the Canary District, and I own.
Awesome. That's great. And have you been in the ownership market for a while, or is it new to you, or?
No, I've had houses, and I now have, I'm actually a landlord for the first time ever, so I'm renting a property. Yeah, and that, I thought you just cash checks, but I had a little hiccup, and apparently you have to do work too. That's what I'm learning. I said, I thought you just had, there was a chirping in the air conditioner evidently, so I had to fix the chirp. Oh. And my tenant's fabulous, but, so it was really quite fun, but there was something I didn't know I had to do. Well, I did know, but I didn't know how much I would do, but it was a little thing and it's fixed. So
that's great.
But it's an adventure, this being a landlord, I'll tell you.
Yes, I'm a landlord too, and usually when my tenants move in, I give them a bottle of Prosecco, and at Christmas time, I give them Christmas gifts because I just want all of us to get along well, and I want us to have a good relationship. So